So I was born and raised in the suburbs of Philly, where I learned from shows like The Dukes of Hazzard and my parents' drunk friends at their keg parties that everyone living south of Philly was redneck, which meant that everybody's related. They wore denim overalls with oil-stained white t-shirts. They drove oversized, loud, muddy vehicles. They made their own alcohol. They spoke with a southern drawl that sounded more like a mumble. And they addressed a group of people as, hey, y'all, or if it's just one person, Bubba or Sugar. So you can imagine my surprise when I met my now husband, Sean, and he was clean cut and articulate, and he told me he was from South Carolina. My husband, Sean and I started, we worked together, we became friends, and then we started dating. And we decided to spend our first Christmas together with his family in South Carolina at his mother's home. We would arrive a few days before Christmas and leave on the 26th. So I had talked to his mom a few times on the phone before I even met her, and she would tell me how much she loved me, even though she had never met me, because I made her son happy. And I was beginning to understand the sugar reference, because her southern drawl was as sweet as sugar. So between Sean's clean-cut appearance and his mother's sugary southern drawl, I began to develop a picture of what his family might be like and what life might really be like in the South. So on our first day of Christmas vacation, Sean and I drove to South Carolina, and as he turned our car, off the paved highway onto a gravel road, and then down a long dirt driveway in the pitch dark, where the only light at the end was coming from the windows of his mother's double-wide trailer, I began to rethink my picture. And again, when we walked into the living room of his mother's double-wide trailer, and there hung a larger-than-life-size rebel flag. You better believe this Yankee was scared. I was more scared than the time I was at my friend's 8th birthday party and her dad whipped out a penis lighter to light a cigarette. That was fun. Called my mom right away on that one. Because something else I learned is that rednecks who were proud of the rebel flag were dangerous people. They were like the most feared Hell's Angels, white supremacists or something. Well, Sean's mother's name is Terry Lee, and she greeted us in the living room, and she insisted that I was not allowed to call her Miss Terry, Miss Rollins, or anything else except Mama. And I wasn't gonna fuck with a redheaded bartender wearing a NASCAR t-shirt who had a tattoo on the loose skin between her thumb and her first finger, gets better, and referred to herself as the bitch. Yeah. She told me that I was unlike her son's miserable ex-wife, also, who punched him one night in the face in the heat of an argument. He got her back good, though, headbutted her in the middle of the night on accident because he was having a bad dream. She also insisted that I have some lemonade. It's not as good as mine because Aunt Dusty made it, but it'll do you. As I was wondering who Aunt Dusty was, she hooked her arm in mine and escorted me down the long hall to the kitchen, where she announced to a large group of people who were wearing at least one piece of camouflage clothing that Kimberly's here, y'all. So Mama sat me down at the kitchen table and she introduced me to Sean's father, aunts, uncles, extended family, and she poured me a glass of that lemonade, which came from a mason jar out of the freezer, as I'm sure you could have guessed. On the second day of our Christmas vacation, I was glad that I had not committed to going deer hunting the night before. Because even though we pretty much had just gone to sleep and we were all hung over from the lemonade, Mama insisted that unless you go deer hunting and you're out the door by 5:30 a.m., it's not worth going. So I was laughing as Sean was pulling his jeans on from the night before, his hunting boots, and I was snuggled underneath the covers until I realized that the 5:30 a.m. wake-up call was not just for those going hunting. Shopping at Walmart at 6 a.m. for Christmas dinner in 2 days was completely unnecessary. But again, I'm not fucking with the redhead. So I climbed up into Mama's Dodge Ram extended cab pickup truck and listened to her as she bitched about the sticky Pepsi can and the gum wrappers that her boyfriend had left in the truck. And then again, I listened to her bitch as she tried to pull her tank-like truck into the parking space and she couldn't get it just right. And then I watched her verbally and physically have an encounter with a shopping cart when she couldn't detach it from the others. And to top it all off, she pulled out a grocery list that filled up the better part of a yellow legal-sized piece of paper. At that point, I wish I had gone hunting. On the third day of Christmas vacation, I learned that the bedroom door that had been shut just past the hall bath this entire time, 3 days, was actually Sean's grandmother's bedroom, and that she had in fact been in there this entire time, which kind of creeped me out. And Sean's mom insisted that she wasn't being rude or antisocial, that she was actually sick and bedridden. She had a hospital bed in there. So of course then I felt like a jackass for saying anything. So that night we decided to go to a bonfire, and of course we left Grandma at home because she's sick and bedridden. And I also decided to leave my fully unopened bottle of Crown Royal at home, only to come back a few hours later to find it empty. And I was like, what the hell? I couldn't even imagine how that had happened. At this point, Mom is on the floor laughing. She can't control herself. And she finally gets herself together and tells me, like, yes, my mother is bedridden and very sick, but she can smell a bottle of alcohol from a mile away. She used to be an alcoholic, and that her doc had cut her off, but if you leave it on the counter, she's going to drink it, which is why they store theirs in the freezer. On the fourth day of Christmas vacation, I'll go ahead and let you. On the fourth day of Christmas vacation, I woke up, it was Christmas Day, and I woke up, it was lovely, to the smell of Mama's pecan and pumpkin pies, and her cooking alongside of her homemade biscuits, and then also the smell of her collards cooking with the ham bone flavor and the rise of the steam from the pot, and the sounds of the thud from the cast iron skillet where Mama was making us milk sausage gravy to go with our biscuits, and also the sound of Mama yelling at her dog, Duke, go on now, get out from under my feet, or to her cat, Smokey, shoo, get off the counter. And I was laying there and I thought, you know, it's a little early for Mama to be cooking the full-fledged Christmas meal, but I learned that Southerners eat earlier. And I thought, this is an excellent concept. You essentially get to eat Christmas dinner twice in one day, and I thought, this is great. Well, this also means for this group of people that you start drinking earlier. So by 4 p.m., we were all feeling really good. Sean, Mama, me, extended family, and everybody. And, oh yeah, so sorry. So we got into a conversation about, of course, WWF wrestling. What else are you going to talk about? Which turned into a Northern versus Southern interpretation of the famed show, which then turned into a fun-loving yet drunken wrestling match between Sean's younger brother Kenny and I, to where I got him to the point where I had lifted him up, and in order to save his pride from getting his ass whooped by a girl, he squeezed my boob. I dropped him pretty quickly. We cracked open some more beers, and of course we laughed about it. Later that evening, his brother Kenny and Sean got into a real throwdown when Kenny, I guess, thought it would have the same effect when he pulled out a loaded shotgun and pointed it at Sean. Not so much. Sean went after him and tackled him to the ground and put his knee to his back and shoved his face in the carpet until Kenny cried uncle, which he did pretty quickly. And then all was forgiven and they cracked some more beers, which I'm sure was great. And we all laughed about how scared Kenny looked. On the fifth and final day of our vacation, our Christmas vacation, as Mama was hugging us and, you know, crying and kissing us goodbye as if it were going to be the last time she would ever see us, as she still does today, I realized that I loved her because in the span of those 5 days, you know, even though her and her wall-sized rebel flag were rough around the edges, she made me feel more like a country girl than a city girl. Aww.